Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What's the most outrageous reason someone filed for divorce? Paralegal. Here. There's so many crazy divorces, and divorce will bring out the absolute worst in couples. When thinking of reasons a divorce started, this one stands out to me the most. At my last firm we did general law, which included probate. A couple did their will with our firm. We drafted everything. They were mid-70s to early 80s. Married 40 years total. Divorced and remarried once. Husband wanted us to put in his will that his kids get his entire estate, but did not want us to tell his wife. He wanted to have us make a secret will and a fake will. The fake will would be signed with her present, and then he wanted us to shred it, and he will come in later to sign the real will. He copied his wife on the email that had all of this information disclosed in it. 2 weeks later he called us and said he wanted to file for divorce instead. Bonus 1. A previous client was pissed his wife was cheating on him. She wanted a non-contested divorce and wanted to use my boss specifically because she knew he was a great lawyer. He pretended to go along with her terms and contacted us literally 2 days before his wife and retained us. He said he didn't care how much money the retainer was, but wanted my boss, so his wife couldn't have him as a lawyer. He called and paid first, so he won that battle. Kind of in the same category, I've had a lot of younger male potential clients come in for divorce consults with their mother. Then, during the consult, the mother does 98% of the talking, and it's clear who actually wants the divorce. I'll usually escort mom to wait in the lobby while I talk to the son directly, and most of the time he's just there to appease his mother. On a related note, I once had just the mother call for a consult because she said explicitly she wanted her son to get a divorce. I politely informed her that's not how divorces worked. Edit, because I apparently don't know how to italicize things on Reddit anymore. Paralegal. A couple got divorced over a cat. Wife called cat Snowball because of white fur and only wanted the cat to eat wet food or chicken breast. Husband called cat Lily again because of white fur and believed it should only eat dry food. These two argued for a year over custody of the cat, but did not give a shoot about their human kids aged 15 months, 4 years, and 6 years old. Not a lawyer, but I've been aching to tell this story for a while. So this girl I went to school with marries this rich guy from Ohio. She moves in with him, and they seem to get along well. 6 months later she files for divorce. Up to that point, all I've heard from her was how good it was going. Anyways, it turns out our buddy had a fetish for going off on urine. He asked her to urinate on him in the tub. At first she agrees to it as she thought it was a one-time thing. But he kept asking for it more and more. She tried to decline it respectfully, but he wouldn't get any of the hints. She finally used the tub being too small as a reason. Next day she comes home with 24 construction guys and their heavy equipment tearing the bathroom walls. A week or so later, they finish up the bathroom. She comes home to a sign left on the fridge with a note to drink up. She got some watering to do. I don't know what exactly she put down as the official reason in the paperwork, but that was definitely her biggest reason to walk out of that relationship. Oh, I forgot to add, he also wanted to bring a horse to do the deed as well and at times asked her to make animal sounds while she stood on top of him. My aunt had a case where the wife had glued all of the outdoor hoses together, so he wouldn't spend more time washing his vehicle anymore. When the glue didn't work she just cut them all up. When he bought new ones they filed for divorce. My 90-year-old client, the husband and his son retained me to initiate divorce proceedings with his 88-year-old wife. They'd been married 60 years. The wife had recently taken to beating him with his own cane because their daughter poisoned her into thinking he was hiding money from them. The battle came down to husband and son versus wife and daughter. At their first court appearance, my client showed up in an old 1950s style pinstripe suit and fedora. He was a farmer his whole life, and this was clearly the only suit he owned. He was such a meek and lovely old gentleman. I had to pass my client on to a new lawyer midway through the proceedings because I accepted a job in a different country, but I understand the divorce was eventually granted. Colleague handled a case where money was not an issue, but the kids were. Neither parent wanted them. I represented a pronoun actress/webcam model who filed for divorce from her husband, who also did the pronoun/webcam model business. He would do gay pronoun on the side because the pay was better. She was hesitant about it, but dealt with it because the pay was decent. Both sides had an agreement that it wasn't cheating, as long as it was for work. One day she came home early and found her husband in bed with 2M. They were not filming. That was too much for her. Needless to say, the old conservative judge couldn't wrap his head around this one. When I clerked for a judge, we had a week-long divorce trial between a couple. The husband was a wildlife photographer and the wife was a stay-at-home wife, no kids, who helped remodel the home. Anyway, husband was mauled by a grizzly bear he was photographing, spent several months in the hospital and rehab, and was served papers shortly after getting out, now without an eye, and with severe scarring on his face and side. She wanted half of everything, the non-scarred half at least. Not a divorce lawyer, but I had a friend whose parents divorced for irreconcilable differences over time spent playing EverQuest. My dad was a divorce lawyer. He had a client who wanted to divorce her husband for 2 reasons. 1. He did not have enough hair on his chest. 2. He did not drive fast enough. Keep in mind this was in the 70s when chest hair was a bit more important. My grandfather's brother was a judge who presided over state issue marriages from time to time. One couple he married returned 6 months later to confirm the wedding and end their trial marriage, when he thusly informed them that there was no such thing and that they had been married for 6 months. They subsequently broke up. I didn't like her anymore 2 days after being married. She was kidnapped in Mexico and he refused to pay ransom. Eventually her family managed to pay, and she was left on the side of the road. It is not outrageous as in petty, but outrageous as how absurd that is. Edit to answer all the questions. I don't know how much they wanted as ransom, but it was substantial as the conversation between her family and him was how he had it liquid, and they had to liquidate investments to get that amount. She may have told me, she may not. Something in pesos and I didn't know the conversion rate. It was all a random number to me. This happened about 7 years ago. He wasn't with her on the trip. She was traveling with cousins and went downstairs alone to get ice cream and wait for them to get ready. I do not know all the details. She was extremely distraught talking about it, and it was not necessary to pry. It was clearly traumatic and even tough. I had a million more questions. I left it alone. I'm an intern, but the judge I work for used to do divorce work. He has some crazy stories, but this one is probably the most outrageous, though the divorce was pretty justified. Every morning this couple would sit in the bathroom together, while one of them had their morning dump. One would sit on the toilet and the other on the rim of the bathtub. This particular morning the wife was on the toilet and husband on the edge of the tub. They started to argue about their relationship, so the wife reaches down, pulls her tampon out, and flings it at husband. I'm told the tampon stuck for a brief second to his forehead before sliding off. He filed for divorce that same day or the next. Edited because I don't know what words mean. I knew a guy from a high school job who divorced his wife of 2 months because she would sleep with a night light, but he could only sleep in total darkness, as they apparently never lived together until after getting married. He hated her nightlight so much that he would often sleep on the couch instead, but sometimes he would claim the bed for himself and lock her out of the bedroom for the night. This was an eccentric late 40s man working at a Burger King who acted like all the other high school co-workers were his best chums and often told us these weird stories. I'm glad I don't work with him anymore. Yikes, that sounds an awful lot like my BO dad. Never bothered to find a new career after being laid off. Worked a lot of odd jobs and minimum wage jobs. Always thought the cashiers at grocery stores, etc. were flirting with him, never mind the 20-year age gap. Finally met and got engaged to a very nice woman who was an appropriate age and had her shoot together. He broke up with her because she called him to ask a question about setting up her new Blu-ray player which he bought her, and he was upset that she wasn't as tech savvy as he was. It was some question like, isn't this just the same as a DVD? This was a 55 years old woman BTW, which I feel like you can cut her some slack over not knowing exactly how Blu-ray works when it just came out. Anyway, he got married to a 25 years old from the Philippines a few years later. We don't speak anymore for many reasons. Some people just never grow up, I guess, and are happy living like immature and petty assholes. Failed exorcisms. Client had an inner ear condition that caused chronic vertigo, but symptoms could be treated with medication. Husband was an evangelical who was convinced his wife had become possessed, and that her vertigo and general crankiness with his methods were evidence of demonic possession. To the medications she was taking was enabling the devil to hide inside her, and 3. The only proper recourse was exorcism. He would hide her meds until she got dizzy, and then try various methods of exorcism. This included sweating it out put under blankets, while incapacitated and locked in a room full of space heater, freezing it out pretty much the reverse with fans, and bags of ice. Surprising it out, he would jump out and scare her like it was the hiccups, but instead of yelling back quote boo, he would recite the Lord's Prayer or Psalms. The final straw was that he tried to back quote surprise it out of her by pushing her down the stairs when they were heading out for dinner. Note, this guy was some type of executive, and they still went out to dinner after the stairs incident. She asked for the divorce at an Applebee's that night. I have often tried to picture that conversation, as she was adamant that he was a total sweetheart and never acted out of malice or anger. I was a legal assistant when this case came in, but this lady divorced her husband of 2 months because he got her an iPad case for her birthday instead of the expensive jewelry she wanted. Man, I was going to say that our client was served divorce papers for sending a couple $100,000 overseas in a scam, but damn, you guys got better ones than me. Edit, it wasn't a couple $100,000, but over $500,000 Australian dollars. Emailing to a Baltic woman back and forth over a period of time, over which he sent the dollars totaling to the $500K plus. No video calling or anything, just emails. My client put his wife in an assisted living facility based on a misdiagnosis, the medication of which caused the wife to be unable to care for herself. While in the facility, my client shocker started dating another woman and methinks began using hard drugs. He used a loot of money on both of these things. She eventually got off the medication and got better. Suffice to say, she was not happy about what had transpired. Friend of mine divorced his then wife because she would only speak French when her family would come over. She was Spanish, as was her family. To add, her family spoke English, French and Spanish. He could only speak Spanish and English. She got bored of being married to him. Her family basically talked shit about him whilst he was there. Was only when he recorded a conversation whilst they were there and got it translated he found out what was going on. Edit, whoopsie. Wasn't the reason, but it happened during the course of the divorce. Neither side would follow the court orders. When they had to go back to court, they were fighting over a pistol and the man's grandmother's bowls. I assumed for weeks that these bowls were some sort of heirloom or expensive china. When they finally brought the bowls in to swap, they were freaking Tupperware. I dropped into court to visit a family friend who was a judge and had quite a treat. A wealthy area farmer and his wife were in court that day fighting about possession/assets. The judge had had enough. After briefly reviewing the history of their case, he offered the couple one last opportunity to retire to a conference room and come to an agreement. Both refused. Their lawyers were clearly as weary as the judge. The judge then asks each party which room in their house was their favorite room. She picked the kitchen, and he picked his gun room. The judge then informed them that, because the matter had dragged on for so long with both behaving like children, he was going to decide the matter of the property. She was awarded everything in the kitchen, and the gun room. Everything else was to be sold at auction with the profits equally divided. Then the judge told them, "Now neither of you is happy, right?" They clearly were not, haha. My husband's first marriage lasted 6 months. He found out she had been sleeping around with several of his friends, and one of those friends finally felt so guilty that he fessed up. Husband actually wanted to work it out if he could, but when he tried to talk to her about it, she locked him out of the house and told him she wanted a divorce. "Why did you marry me?" he finally asked her. Her response? Because he was the only one she was sleeping with who could afford her dream wedding. Yup, Beach married him because she wanted a wedding and chose the person who could afford it. Mind you, he wasn't wealthy by any means. He just wishes his friend had felt guilty about say, 6 months sooner. My douche cousin told his wife she had 3 chances to give him a son. Daughter was born first. Strike 1. Son was born second. Then they find out the boy can't eat glut, so my cousin divorced her and has made 0 effort to see his kids. Edit. I remembered something else he did. He would take off work and instead of spending time with the babies or her he'd tell her just act like him at work and do all your normal stuff. Then he'd watch TV all day. Douche. My great-great-grandparents had an interesting case. He was abusive, like pimped her out, and then beat her for infidelity levels of abuse. This was the 1910s, though, and in our state you couldn't initiate a divorce for cruelty. In fact, the only possible grounds for divorce was infidelity. A few times, she tried just leaving him anyway. Once he came home from work and she, plus all 8 of their kids, were just gone. But he always found them, and since they were still married, he had every right to grab the kids and go back home with them. Finally, she moved out and went to live with another man. She flaunted the new guy around town until her no-good husband got embarrassed enough to sue her for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. Although she couldn't read or write, she put her ex on those papers the minute he served her. It was a major local scandal, very Catholic community. Divorce was rare, but she got what she needed to be safe. My client was the outrageous one, so my heart went out to his poor wife. He had OCD, which manifested primarily financially, so he made their lives a penny-pinching hell. Examples: he was obsessed with avoiding unnecessary driving wear and tear on the car, gas expenses, so he cut the whole family's hair at home, and never let them eat at a restaurant, or go to the movies. Weirdest of all, he kept 1 toilet paper roll on him at all times, and you had to get 1 square from him before you could go to the bathroom. He never gave more than 1 square. Wife finally got fed up and left him when he gave her bangs during an in-home haircut, and their daughter was so traumatized by the toilet paper thing they couldn't potty train her. Also, he hated paying his divorce lawyer bill. He was also an old-fashioned mega Catholic who considered divorce a deadly sin. He viewed my whole job as an unnecessary and sinful expense. Not me, but a friend my mum has divorced her husband because his mother still coddled him at age 40 with his consent. They lived with his mother common in Asia. By coddle I mean that she would walk straight into their room after his shower and powder his back for him. They couldn't lock their bedroom door because his mother would come in as and when she wanted. If they locked the door, she would knock repeatedly asking what they were doing. Lol, what would they be possibly doing? Playing poker. Viralegal here. Still remember an early case I worked on. Man divorced his wife for her bingo addiction. 10 to 12 times per week she went to bingo. She was 82, he was 86. But the all-time greatest. 2 20-somethings. They were irreconcilable because he kept smoking her weed stash when she wasn't home. I worked as a paralegal for a divorce lawyer. Case analysis was one of my main responsibilities. I shoot you not. A recently married couple of 2 years broke it off because the husband would not stop feeding the dog. The dog got outrageously fat. Apparently she saw connection between the dog and future children. Not the most outrageous, but I had a client incur about 20 additional hours of billable hours because he and his ex-wife were battling and went to trial over their Star Wars collection. This was the only issue at trial. They were able to work out custody, child support, the house, but the Star Wars collection went to trial. The judge ended up splitting it in the most churlish way possible, basically giving each side half of what they wanted, and then mixing and matching everything else, and breaking up collections. When speaking about it at a conference, the judge admitted she did it because if they were going to act like children, she would treat them like children. The thing is, the value of this collection was over $100K, so hardly kids stuff. Neither side had it in them to appeal, nor was the case law on either side, given judicial discretion in property distribution. A friend of mine got married when she was 19, so she could drink at the bar in Wisconsin. You can drink underage with a parent or a spouse. Then when she turned 21 she got a divorce, since she was legal to drink W/owe him. Seems like an easy in and out transaction, but oh no. The biggest item they fought over was the garage beer refrigerator. Go figure. Worked in matrimonial law for a year and a half before I had to leave BC. It just overwhelmed me with how awful humanity is. I'll never forget filing papers that described her soon to be ex-husband's behavior, including masturbates on the living room couch without closing the door and leaves sticky tissues everywhere, with further description of their 3 young children potentially walking in on him. I used to work in a general practice firm, and the guy that worked across the hallway from me was a family law attorney. He was a good attorney, but every day I would hear him yelling on the phone at his clients. One day I asked him why he did when it was obviously stressful in a non-legal work type of way. He pointed out that there's one chapter of statutes dedicated to it, and you need to know a little civil procedure and that's about it. It's an amazing segment of business. Not only is not that difficult from an intellectual rigor perspective, but holy shoot, those family law attorneys make serious bank for willing to put up with the headaches. I would routinely hear him yelling at clients like, "Don't go over there. I'm instructing you to not go there. If you go there, I will fire you as a client, and when you go to jail I won't take your call." For the record, this was in a fairly affluent suburb. Most of the disputes that would drive him into my office for a break would revolve around parents wanting to know their course for ex-hubby dropping the kids off 4 minutes later than agreed, and how the client planned to get even. I also recall one time a client had gotten his cell phone number and called him on a Saturday evening with some emergency. Spoiler, his ex had done something egregious like took the kids to the pool without his consent. So, on Monday morning the attorney sent the client an invoice for $500 for a Saturday phone call which probably lasted like 5 minutes. He did it so the guy would call him and say what's this, and then the attorney could explain to him that is what he charges for non-emergency weekend calls. This time he'd waive it, but if he ever did it again he could be sure to get a bill that he'd end up paying.